Good afternoon. I'm Rachel Chandler, the owner of New Mexico Nature by Design. I'm in my beautiful backyard today to show you how to certify your yard as a backyard habitat through the Valle National Wildlife Refuge using my fill-in-the-blank Backyard Habitat Workbook. For this video, you will need my workbook, the plant list off the Friends of the Valle National Wildlife Refuge website, and the application to certify your yard that's also from their website. First, we're going to start with the workbook. It separates all the plants in your pollinator garden or potential garden into 6 different categories: desert accents, perennials, grasses, shrubs, trees, and vines. But before we start categorizing all your plants, let's first make a list of what you have or want to have growing. We're going to start today by going around my yard and seeing what I have. Here, I have goldenrod. This beautiful yellow blooming perennial grows near the river here in Albuquerque and attracts butterflies, but you don't need to know that yet. Just write down the name on the list for now. If you don't know the names of your plants, download a plant identifier app or take a photo to a local garden center. Here, I have lavender. Here I have an apple tree, so I would write that down on my list. Go through all of the desert accents, flowers, grasses, shrubs, trees, and vines on your property and write them down. The next step is to take your plant list from your garden inventory and categorize them into one of the 6 categories in my workbook. See, I have sections for desert accents, perennials, grasses, shrubs, trees, and vines. For help in categorizing them, you can print out the Valle de Oro plant list, which has them categorized already, and use online resources and books for plants that are not on the Valle de Oro list. See, from my garden inventory list, I placed them into categories in my workbook. The next step in the certification process is to take the Valle de Oro plant list and find out which of your plants you categorized are listed on their list as a qualifying plant. So take the workbook and start with the desert accents. Notice on the Valle de Oro plant list, they have the scientific name, the common name, the flowering and fruiting season, and habitat value. Look to see if you have any plants listed under desert accents on the Valle de Oro list. I have purple prickly pear listed on the workbook, and I found it on the plant list, so I would check mark the box left of the plant under BRP, which stands for Backyard Refuge Plant List. Then I would check mark any box that applies to purple prickly pear. On the Valle de Oro plant list, it says purple prickly pear is good for bees and hummingbirds, so I would check mark the box under bees and hummingbirds on the workbook. It also says it blooms in spring, so I would check mark the spring box. Go through each of your plants the same way. If you find a plant in the workbook that you listed from your yard that is not listed in the Valle de Oro plant list, then leave the BRP box blank and don't include it in the totals at the bottom. Even if the plant has a pollinator value like lavender, the qualifications for the habitat certificate requires you to use the plants listed only on the Valle de Oro plant list. The substitutions would be plants of similar nature that are in the same plant family. Say you have a sage that is not on the list, but is related to the sage that is, they will probably permit that plant. So you will have to make note of plant substitutions in the application. When filling out the workbook, some plants have more than one value. Take Lady Banks Rose, for example. It produces nectar for bees and butterflies in spring and is a cover shelter for birds the entire year. It's listed on the plant list as contributing spring through winter for bees, butterflies, and birds. On the workbook, I check mark the box under bees and butterflies and mark the box under spring because that's when ladybank's roses bloom and the nectar is available. Then I would check mark the box for winter and make note that it's cover for birds and not a food source. This information will be important for the application because they want to know how many food sources and shelters are available in winter that your garden provides. If you differentiate that on the winter column in the workbook, it will make it easier to tally it up at the end. Now that you've finished filling out the workbook, it's time to find out the results. At the bottom of each of the category pages, there is a section that totals the results. Add the totals of the BRP plants only. Add together all the check marks from each section at the bottom. After you have the totals from each category, write the totals into the totals from each category page. See, I have the BRP totals from each page, and I added them together at the bottom. This gives you the total number of pollinator plants in your garden or potential garden. Then add the grand totals up from each category to get a clear picture of pollinator plants that might be missing in your garden. See, I have 14 plants for birds. But I only have 5 plants for butterfly hosts. So I have 20 plants for summer, but I only have 5 for the winter months. Then add the grand totals of the plant categories together to get the grand total of all pollinator contributions your garden is providing. See, I only have 26 plants total, but they are providing 51 pollinator contributions. Now that we have our totals, let's fill out the Backyard Habitat application on the Friends of the Valle de Oro website. I went ahead and printed out the application to show you how to fill it out. The first question in the application asks you how many native plant food sources your space provides. To answer this, go to the totals from each category page in the workbook where we added all of the grand totals together from each category. Mine says 51 contributions, so I would select 6 or more on the application. Next question asks how many supplemental feeders your space provides. This is bird feeders, hummingbird feeders, etc. I have 6, so I'll select 4 or more on the application. Next question asks the total number of native plants, food sources, and supplemental feeders combined. This answer is fill in the blank, so I put 57. I have 51 plant contributions and 6 supplemental feeders. The next 4 questions on the application asks about available food sources during each season. You would go to the totals from each category page in the workbook and look at the totals listed for each season, which is right down here. See, I have 16 for spring, 20 for summer, 15 for fall, and 5 for winter. Remember, for winter, some of the plants are either seed producing plants or cover for birds. So only add the plants that have seeds in winter for this answer. The next question in the application asks to list all the plant species that produce food. This is a fill-in-the-blank question. So you would start with the desert accents in the workbook and go down the list, listing every plant that has the BRP checkmark. Exclude any plants that is used for cover or shelter. Also list any plant substitutions you might have in this category. The next questions are about sources of shelter your garden provides, like an evergreen shrub or a birdhouse. Go over each category page in the workbook and look for plants in the winter column you labeled as cover or shelter plants. Use these plants for your answers in your shelter section in the application. I have sunflowers, pine tree, and arborvitae shrubs listed as shelter plants in my workbook. Well, that's it for now. If you want to purchase my workbook, which has a bunch of great gardening info, go to my website at newmexiconaturebydesign.com or email me at naturedesignllc@gmail.com. I can also do a consultation at your house to help you fill out the workbook and application. Thank you so much for joining me today on how to certify your yard as a backyard habitat. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me for further information.